Good morning, everybody. My name is Connor Flanagan. I'm the Director of Education here at the Southampton History Museum. And today we are joined with Tim Godbold. He is an interior designer, and he's going to give his lecture today, Back to the Future. Today's lecture is co-sponsored with the Rogers Memorial Library. You can go to their website, myrml.org, to see all their future programs, and southamptonhistory.org to find all of our future programs. There'll be a little bit of overlap between us two. We do co-sponsor a lot together. Anybody that is here watching today, if you have any questions, please feel free to submit them either through the chat function or the Q&A function through Zoom. And then at the end of today's talk, I'll pop back in and we'll ask all your questions and see what Tim has to say. So without any further ado, turn it over to Tim and enjoy, everybody.
Hi everyone, I'm Tim Godbold and welcome to my Zoom conversation about architecture in the Hamptons from the 70s and 80s. I met with Tom, who runs the Southampton Museum, last summer, and we were talking about what I was doing. And he was like, I'd love it if you would come in the winter time and talk about this. And, I was like, Tom, I'm not an academic. There's a lot more people who know more about this than I do. But he was like, you know what? I love your passion and just share what, we spoke about today. So I'm just going to really run through what I spoke with Tom about and what I spoke to people around the community out here with reference to the vernacular of the modern architecture, specifically from the 70s and the 80s. I met Tom through Jesse, who is now the Southampton mayor, who is also very much aware and concerned with a lot of these houses getting torn down. So, the thing is, I'm interested in this because when I grew up in Australia, my father was an architect. And as a child in the 70s, we lived in a modern type house, similar to some of these that I'm going to show you. So I've always had an affinity for this aesthetic, of a modern house. And also the 80s. The 80s, I was a teenager. So I have strong emotional ties to that era as well. So for me, it really resonates with me, this type of architecture. Unfortunately, though, with a lot of this architecture, it's not on a lot of people's radar, and it's not what people are particularly interested in. I remember somebody once said to me, it's easy to love beautiful looking people, right? And it's interesting because, a lot of these houses aren't particularly beautiful. You may hate glass brick and you may hate modern, but there's no reason why it can't live in the same world as, as Sag Harbor, Captain's House. A lot of you know me through Instagram, and I have a cat, right? I got a cat through COVID. And someone said to me, oh, I thought you were more a dog person. And, I'm a cat and a dog person, and I love traditional and I love modern. I don't have to pick what type of aesthetic that I am attracted to. I can like both. So saying that, I'm going to launch into a slideshow that I started. And let me see if I can share the screen. New at this. Slideshow from beginning. Okay, so hopefully you're getting this. So this house here, actually, on the front cover is a Gwathmey house, a Charles Gwathmey in. And again,
sorry, Tim. I don't think we're seeing your screen right now.
You are. You're not seeing. Okay, hang on.
Yep. There we go. Yep. There we go.
Okay, sorry about this. I'm a little new to this myself. So so the first house is Back to the Future. The house is in Amagansett by Charles Gwathmey. We're not going to talk so much about Mr. Gwathmey today, as I really want to sort of talk about how this all started. And this started through a friend of mine we were working on a job in San Francisco, and he's a stylist, and he gave me this book, and it was called The Houses of the Hamptons by Paul Goldberger. And, you know, we were in this middle of this install, super busy. I looked at the cover, thought, looks okay. But then I opened it, and inside this book were some incredible, incredible houses that are all in the Hamptons. And, you know, Paul is a Pulitzer Prize winner. He is an American architecture critic, very well renowned. He lives in Amagansett. He's talked extensively about houses out here in the Hamptons. And, you know, there's an incredible amount of beautiful late 20th century design out here, specifically, you know, in the 70s and 80s. A lot of the people that lived and had beach houses out here during that time were creatives. They were in television, they were in the arts, they were in advertising. You know, it was a group of people that were a lot less more like in finance as say they are today, right? So, so when I got this book on Paul, and I'll just go back to that slide. When I got this book, I took some pictures from some of the houses inside of it, and I posted them on Instagram in my daily feed. And somebody replied back to me, oh yeah, we tore this one down. You know, and I was horrified. I couldn't believe that a Norman Jaffe, quintessential Norman Jaffe house had been torn down. And that really horrified me. I couldn't believe it, because I in my foolishness, I figured that there would be committees out here. There'd be a whole bunch of people that would be really looking after these houses. You know, I thought everybody would be treating them like a gem. And, you know, I started reaching out to people like Alistair Gordon, who has written extensively about these houses out here. And when we were talking, and a lot of these people were really nice in getting back to me. You know, Paul emailed me back. You know, Alistair I spoke to a couple of times on the phone. And, you know, he's like, you know, when I said, you know, like, what's the committee? You know, I want to go and join it, you know. And he's like, well, there isn't. And if you're going to do anything about it, you better do it now, because they are all disappearing. You know, no one's protecting these houses. There isn't any legislation to save them, protect them. They are literally just sitting out in the wind, waiting to get picked off. So I was like, what can I do? You know, and then I looked at like something like Palm Springs Modernism Week that I've been going to for, you know, the past 6 and 7 years. And it's incredible. You know, they have such a respect and admiration for all of the beautiful mid-century architecture in their area. And they do these incredible modernism weeks, you know, where they do house tours, people do talks, lectures. There's a bunch of like great shopping events, you know, vintage furniture. And, you know, in my little way, I thought, you know, this is something we could be doing. You know, we could be creating our own, you know, start off small. You know, we can maybe where, you know, a few of these houses are open. You know, I feel like you're going to get more bees with honey, right? So rather than me sitting here and telling you how these houses are getting pulled down, they're getting pulled down by developers, they're getting pulled down by greedy finance people. I just want to focus on how beautiful what we have is out here, you know, and to show you and say, hey, this is so exciting. You know, bet you didn't know that this house was out here, because I didn't know, you know, and I've been a resident of Southampton since 2012. You know, I live here. I'm in the industry, you know, but a lot of these houses you never see because, you know, they're 40 years old and they're behind massive privets, stone walls. It's really hard to see these houses out here. So what do? I started up a little website. I was like, so I've got to call it something. So I've called it Hampton's 20th Century Modern. And, you know, this is a way for me to start getting Google to recognize the name and getting into people's search engines. So when Tom spoke to me, he's like, can you, focus on Southampton? So some of the houses that I want to talk about today are mostly in the Southampton area. And first person I want to speak about is Myron Goldfinger. And Myron, it's very hard. There's not a lot of information on Myron. When I was researching this, I literally had to buy a book, and really research through like barely anything on the web. And the thing with Myron is he drew a lot of his inspiration from, shapes of Mediterranean churches, dwellings. The picture on the right-hand corner, that was from his book. Great architect. And if you are interested in reading about him, this is an incredible book, and you can buy it on Amazon. I highly, highly recommend you looking at this book. It's really inspiring. So this house is called Temple in the Dunes, and you can actually see this from the road on Maiden Lane. It is actually one of the few houses that is quite visible. So Temple of the Dunes was built in Southampton in 1984. And the whole point of this design was it was to worship the sun. So, all floors have a 360-degree view. As you see, there's a lot of decks, a lot of ways for you to get sun. I guess this was before the ozone layer conversation. And we were all outside, rubbing olive oil on our bodies and thinking the sun was great. So the front view of the house, you can see, is again, so the top floor was the master suite, and skylights, pictures of the bay, views of the bay, views of the ocean. And then the second floor of this house was living room, dining. The reason why all of that was on the second floor is because it went over the dunes and you got a great view of the ocean from the second floor. As you see, the whole second floor is glass. And then on the lower deck, it was the entrance to the house, bedrooms, and a walkway to the cabana, which is the structure behind there. And that has a 3-car garage. And you can see some elliptical machines, I think, in the window. So I'm guessing that's where the gym is. This is a higher, a global sort of view from Google Earth. And this is another great way to discover houses that are out here because they are so hidden. When I first started talking to people, I spoke to somebody in California, in LA, who was on a committee about conservation. And I was like, so what do I do? And she's like, well, Tim, first thing, you're going to be talking to a wall for a really long time. And secondly, you need to collect a list of addresses of all of these really important houses. So over the last summer, I just started writing out and collecting addresses. And a lot of them I had to get through Google Maps. It was really hard to find a lot of information on, a lot of these houses. There's a close-up of the house on Meadow Lane. You can see it from the beach. Just a really interesting, fun point. The luxury liner, that cover of his book, was featured in The Wolf of Wall Street. And this brings up a whole other point about the 80s. And, we're starting to really look back and enjoy, the decadence and the lifestyle that was in the 80s with humor, big shoulder pads. It's coming back a lot in film, things like TV series like Black Monday, Stranger Things, Why Women Kill, fashion, furniture. It's all starting to come back. Things like Memphis furniture. I've watched that. You couldn't give that away 10 years ago, and now it's starting to come back in vogue. And I'm seeing huge prices going for a lot of those original Memphis pieces. So 80s is definitely making a comeback. The next person I want to talk about on Main Lane and in Southampton is Norman Jaffe. A lot has been written and said about Norman Jaffe, but he has a presence in Southampton. Probably Norman's proudest accomplishment was the Gates of the Grove, the Jewish school in East Hampton. And you can actually see that beautiful structure from Route 27 as you're going through East Hampton. You know, Guy was credited with pioneering the design of rustic modernist houses in the Hamptons. He is sort of probably the quintessential modernist designer out here. A lot of people love his houses. It's easier in some ways to get his houses looked after and maintained because of his name. So a few of the houses on and around Southampton is Xanadu, as it's been named, which is in Barons Lane in Southampton. This was built in the early 80s, and Architectural Digest did a beautiful feature on the refurbishment last year. And designer Wesley Moon did a beautiful job at the interiors of this house are incredible. And he really nailed it. He brought this incredible structure into the 21st century, made it livable, modern, softened the edges. You know, a lot of his houses are quite hard in a lot of ways, but he did an incredible job. This is a beautiful example of taking an old house and, you know, really doing something special with it. Another house on Meadow Lane is another Jaffe. You can't really see this from the street. If you look at the road view up on the left-hand top corner, that driveway is sort of elevated. You know, Jaffe sunk a lot of his houses into the ground. So his houses were quite low and, you know, were all part of the landscape. They weren't structures that really stuck out. You know, so this is a really beautiful version, you know, beautiful house of Jaffe's. And you can see this one more on the beachside if you're walking along there. You can get definitely a great view of this house. Another Jaffe on Meadow Lane. Unfortunately, you know, I think Mr. Jaffe would say this probably wasn't his finest house he ever designed. This house is probably one of his later houses. It is for sale. I think it's going for like 22 million. And I think that fact is because it's on a prime piece of real estate. So the chances of this surviving is probably limited. You know, someone will probably buy that land and tear it down. You know, the only person that would really buy and keep that would be somebody who, you know, was a Jaffe fan. Another person who has some properties on Maiden Lane in Southampton is Ward Bennett. And, you know, Ward Bennett, very underrated. He, you know, was self-taught. He's an American icon. This guy's career encompassed so many different aspects. You know, he was in architecture. He was mostly known for his interiors, but he also designed a lot of furniture, ceramics, cutlery. You know, I even found his cutlery is still for sale online at a supermarket. It's crazy. And this house up here in the right-hand corner is Allen House, and it's in Further Lane in East Hampton. I felt like I wanted to really mention this one as it is, you know, one of his finest pieces of work. And this was built in 1968. I mean, this house could have been built 2 years ago. It could have been built last year. You know, he was such a visionary, and this is why I love so many of these houses, is they were so ahead of their time, and their proportions and the drama of these houses is incredible. I love it. I mean, it's just, I find it completely fascinating. This is Sugarman House, and this is on Meadow Lane as well. And you can kind of see this from the road. If you sneak into the driveway, you know, a little bit, you can see the back of the house. And this, you know, again, this house is in the dunes, low, but again, built in 1969, could have been built last year. I mean, it's a beautiful piece of architecture. You know, the thing is with Ward, this is his private house, his own house that was in East Hampton, and there was a reserve in the around the property, and it's still to this day kept in excellent condition. In fact, the contractor who worked with Ward Bennett on a lot of his houses out here, I've gotten to know in the past year. I'm working on a job together with him in East Hampton on Further Lane, and we got talking, and anyway, it came out that he knew Ward very well. He works on the houses, you know, through the years. And if we go back to this house on Further Lane, you know, this house was bought in the early 90s by Jan Wenner of Rolling Stone magazine and his wife Jane. And Bennett came in and updated it in the early 90s. And Jane Wenner still owns this house. And Jeff, the contractor, is still in touch with her. He said, he always says the nicest things about Ward and very respectful. A little off subject, but really worth knowing is that this apartment of Ward Bennett's in New York City, you know, it was the staff quarters on the roof of the Dakota building. And what he did is he got a bunch of them and he knocked them down and turned it into an apartment. You know, so this was Ward's apartment, I guess, in the 70s and 80s. And this was on the market last year, believe it or not. And it actually sat there for a while, but Tom Ford bought it. So what I'm hoping is that Tom's going to, you know, draw inspiration from Ward's original apartment design. And maybe in the future, we will get to see, you know, what he does with this. I would be super excited to see Tom's vision, as I think it already reads very Tom Ford, so I'm excited to see it. Another person who I really admire and whose work is out here is Richard Meyer. And he's a world-known architect. Probably his most known building is the Getty Museum in LA. You know, his design is very Corbusier. His house, the Saltzman House, this is probably my favorite house out here, and it's why I put it on the cover of my webpage, is because I love the lines. I really do. It was built in 1967, 68. It is still there to this day. There's a lot of images on this house. There's some beautiful interior shots. So, you know, I'm tired of looking at mid-century furniture and houses, and, you know, I'm always looking for like, what's next, what's new, like drawing on, you know, older, you know, interesting houses and design. And the interiors of this house always inspire me immensely. Curiously enough, when I was talking to Michael Pucci from Ralph Pucci in the City, and I work with Michael on projects, and, you know, he's a really nice guy, and he sent me in last summer, you know, a catalog, sort of, they were doing this exhibition of artists. And I sent him my website saying, hey, this is what I'm working on. And he was like, that's super interesting because we actually have these Richard Meyer floor lamps. And, you know, you can really see the inspiration of the house in these. And I think, I was like, you know, would you ever like get a group of Richard Meyer's pieces together and be interested in doing, you know, like a show out here, like an event? He's like, yeah, we would love to do something like that. So, you know, I'm constantly looking of ways that we can get a weekend out here of you know, house tours. You know, the thing is we have COVID going on. So this is a little further down the road, but we could really do interesting things and get people excited about these houses. You know, this is where the house is. This is obviously a Google Maps image in Further Lane. And I have friends who have a house right with the, I don't know, just on the other side of the road. I can see it right now. And then, you know, across the street is a Norman Jaffe at 100. My clients are at 125. And so I love driving down this street because you can see this Jaffe from the road. And it is really a beautiful, beautiful house. You know, Saltzman House is just down the street as well. If you go down further down that road, you would come across the Ward Bennett house, which you probably see better from the street, as a lot of these houses are set way back from the road and closer to the beach for the beach views. Unfortunately, you know, what's happened over the past, well, 10, 20 years as people have, come out here more, and the area is getting more and more, I don't know, filled with generic housing. And a lot of these houses were originally built on large pieces of land, either on the water or in a potato field. For instance, here we're looking at a Peter Blake house. Now, Peter Blake is probably one of the most premier architects of his generation back around that period. And, this house was built in 1957, and it probably cost about $3,000 or $4,000 to make, right? And the thing, you can see these really large windows, and a lot of these houses were much about, there wasn't a lot of air conditioning, right? So you would open up the windows and the doors, and the breezes would go through the house, and it would really be as one with nature. You would have these beautiful views of the bay and all the greenery around you. I mean, if you look at the picture on the right, you can just see a slew of, these sort of more traditional type houses just really getting backed up onto these properties. And, this is a prime piece of real estate, and the chances of this getting torn down and replaced with another McMansion is probable, and these houses that are, the owners, pass them on to their children, who pass them on to their children, and they get it. And then they're like, well, I don't really want this house anymore. I'd rather get the money for the land. And so, the chances of these surviving is minimal. I mean, real estate companies will hire an architect to do a rendering, right, of something that looks like this house. It still means you're going to tear it down. It's just probably going to ease your conscience a bit if you have a house that looks a bit like the original Peter Blake. I don't know, but I worry a lot about these houses. The house right behind it is another Peter Blake, which is a beautiful house, and coincidentally is owned by a Perth boy and his wife. And we had a nice conversation when he was back in Perth last summer, because he was looking to do the same thing as sort of what I'm doing right now, is, what can we do to save these houses? And super great guy. Like I said, a lot of these people were really interested in talking and offering their opinions and thoughts on what we're doing. All right, in memoriam, kind of a bit of a downer moment. So I just want to talk about a few of the houses that are no longer here. And, it would be a shame if in 20 years' time, people come to the Hamptons like, oh, I want to see that amazing, house. I want to see that Saltzman house. I've heard so much about it, and we're like, well, too bad it got torn down. It was on a really prime piece of real estate. Now it's gone. So, it's really important to get the word out. And this is a really perfect example. This, you can see some incredible pieces of art here. That Pierre Dubuffet piece in itself is incredible. They had Picassos, they had everything. It was called Travertine House because the exterior of the facade was in travertine. And if you go to the next slide, there you go. You can see the travertine in the right-hand picture. All of the art in this building was donated to the Museum of Modern Art. Actually, Martha Stewart owned this house for a while and started doing some work. She wanted to add, I think it was a basement to the property, and then during the process sold it. And then the person who bought it next, they tore it down. So, this is a really sad thing to see, these beautiful houses, gone. Another one that's demolished is on Meadow Lane. This was, prime real estate. I mean, it backed onto a car park, not so great, but, right on the water in Meadow Lane. So, that's gone. So, but let's start, let's talk about something fun and uplifting, and that's New Life. And this is probably one of my favorite little houses out in the Hamptons. And this is by Andrew Geller. And it was lovingly restored by a couple who have a lovely young daughter. And, you know, this is what like beach life was like in the 60s, 70s. You know, it was about escaping the city and going to a simpler place. You know, you got like a duck egg blue old bands, you've got the surfboards, you've got the bikes and the baskets, you know, walking around barefoot, sand, you know, wiping off sand on your feet as you come into the house, you know, relaxing in your rattan furniture, and just really taking a step back from the rat race of New York City and just taking time to be with nature, you know. And this is a really beautiful update on an Andrew Geller house. Another Geller is Mothersill, and this house is in Watermill. And Paul Massey is an architect out here, and he very nicely spoke to me about this project that he did. And basically this Geller was like a little studio on, you know, and these houses were on large lots of land. So they were brought on board to build secondary dwellings. And what they came up with was this really cool idea of creating these boardwalks that would connect all of the houses together without knocking down the original piece, you know, of the original Geller house. So this won a bunch of awards. And
Tim,
yeah,
I think you accidentally clicked something in your emails up too.
How do I get rid of that? Here we go.
Yeah, I think if you just either minimize that, or if you go back to the PowerPoint and you just hit full screen on that, it should hopefully.
Okay, let me just do that for a second. All right, let's start again. Okay.
These are the joys of Zoom lectures.
So where am I right now? Have I shared a screen or not?
Not yet. You just got to hit the share screen again, and then you should be all good.
Okay. Sorry about this, everyone. So let me just go back there. Okay. Seeing my desktop. Okay. All right, sorry. You're gonna have to bear with me while I do this. Okay. Sorry. Actually, it's not working. Okay. So
I think if you just reopen that, the Back to the Future.
yeah, I can't open it. Okay. Yeah, all right, we're gonna have to probably scrap that. Yeah, sorry. Really sorry to do that. Yeah, that's a shame. Yeah, sorry. So there we go. I can't restore the PowerPoint, unfortunately. So where I left off was with Andrew Geller's house in Mothersill. There's also a couple of houses that were updated and done by a gentleman in, yeah, I'm gonna lose my train of thought right now. So I think at that point, I'm gonna have to sort of hand it over back to you guys and just end it by saying, you know, there's a website and an Instagram page. I've had people contact me through the website saying, hey, I have this house that my parents owned in the North Fork. You know, it's not a Jaffe, but it's still of that genre. Do you know anyone who could help me, you know, work on construction, because I want to bring it back. You know, it was our family house. We love it. So from that point, I'm able to offer, you know, a list of people, builders who can work on these houses. And I'm here to help and assist in any way I can with getting people inspired by these houses. And on that note, I will pass it back to Connor.
All right. Well, these technical issues always happen. There's always something that goes on. So
Yeah.
not to worry.
Does
But
anyone have a question or?
but yeah, so anybody who might have a question or anything like that, like I said before, you can send it in the chat function, or you can submit it in the Q&A function. And let's see, we have a question right now, actually from my boss, Tom Edmonds. When is your book on modernism on the South Fork coming out?
Yeah, actually, part of that's a good question. You know, a lot of one of the last slides that I had on my PowerPoint was there's a lot of great books on modernism in Long Island, and you know, and there's Alistair Gordon's books are terrific. Paul Goldberger's books are great. So I don't have one. I'm also trying to run a full-time job. So this for me is a little bit of, you know, it's a passion project. And, you know, I wrote a book already once, and that was a lot of extra work. So we'll see. I just sort of want us to hope that we're going to save some of these houses.
Gotcha. Rather than writing about wanting to save them, you want to do the work to save the houses.
Yeah, you know, even if it's just one house at a time, you know, that would be great. You know, I doubt sort of getting any sort of like laws on what you do. These houses are really going to help them. But you know, it's more about just getting people excited about these houses. You know, I bought a house last year, and it was built in 1978. And, you know, a lot of people would be looking at this house thinking, oh my God, it's a dump. And you can see I've just started putting in new windows. And this was, you know, by an architect out here called Eugene Futterman. And it's a really wacky, cool house. And so, you know, I'm working on restoring it. When it's restored, it'll be great, you know, and if I can inspire people or help people to do this, you know, I mean, that's really the goal, you know.
Yeah, I would say this, it reminds me a lot of my favorite event that we do at the museum, Insider's View, every year, where it's a house tour. And so it's usually in June, and we get really interesting, both mostly historic houses, but we also try and throw on just interesting looking houses every year. And unfortunately, last year with COVID, we had to change it, and it became more of a garden tour. Which will probably be the same route this year. Who knows? Still very much in the early planning stages. But yeah, getting to see all the really interesting homes out here. Especially,
Yeah.
I grew up out here, so I only got to see them from outside. Now getting a chance to pop in on occasion is fun.
Yeah, I mean, people love house tours. I mean, the thing is, though, you know, a lot of people are private and don't want you in their houses. But I do know of some really great houses out here that I've spoken to the owners, and they would love people to see them. You know, there's a question here by, I see, Nick Fix. Excellent lecture, Tim. Thanks so much. Can you talk a bit on your approach to interiors within these 20th century modern homes, particularly in relation to palette and form? How do you negotiate contemporary taste with period pieces? Thanks again. Great question. So, you know, how do I do that? So the thing is, you know, with the 70s and 80s, you know, you never want it to look too retro. You know, and I don't live in that period, you know, it's all about now 21st century, but I always find super inspiration in these pieces. And of course, it's about a mixture. So you don't want it to look like a pastiche from Wall Street, you know, these. And so what I do is I just look a lot of individual pieces and just incorporate small elements into interiors that I would be working on now. You know, a lot of the palettes in the 80s were beiges and creams and peach and pale gray and like a purple, you know, lilac was really big. So it's like take what you want and leave the rest. You know, there's a lot of movement around curvature in furniture. You know, everything's getting rounded and arches are making a comeback. And when I was a little kid in the 70s, I was obsessed with houses with arches. I would count them. And that's making a comeback. And a lot of the furniture that I'm seeing, the new furniture, a lot of that inspiration is coming from the 80s. And, furniture is getting a little bigger again. We've been in this deluge of, small, teak, Danish. It's great for a little New York apartment, but out here in the Hamptons, a lot of these rooms are really big. So they can handle that, a bigger proportion. So,
I had another question
yeah.
from somebody asking were you going to mention any female architects, or are there any female architects that you know of out here that had interesting construction projects?
I don't. I saw that question from Karen, and I was like, oh God, what can I do? What can I say? I don't, and that's a really good question, and I think I will have to look into that, because I'm sure there are. And I will definitely get into and look at that. Yeah.
So let's see, we had a few other questions. Not so much a question, but saying thank you. This was both sad and hopeful. I really pray you and like-minded people are successful saving these works of art, an important part of history. I think it's a really great project for you to undertake and sort of work towards. And just from working at the museum and thinking historically, a lot of people would sometimes complain to us, the History Museum, about how a lot of the 17th and 18th century homes sometimes got destroyed as other houses got built in the future. And then now, as we push farther into the 21st century, we're starting to see the 20th century works of art start to disappear. And it's just a sort of cyclical process.
Yeah, I mean, there's a moratorium on anything under, after 100 years. But there's a lot of people that they want to make money. They want to tear these houses down, and they have a lot of money. There's no way I can compete with these developers. And I also don't want dead animals on my doorstep. So the only way I can really do anything about this is by getting the word out. There's a lot of people out there that are really conscious about what is happening with this architecture, and a lot of people who have way more knowledge than me, and that's good. I would love it if I had looked into this and someone said, oh yeah, Tim, we've got it under control, we're doing this and we're doing that, but it doesn't seem so much, and I have a voice, I can talk, and so I'm happy to do my part. And this is also part of my father, it's part of my father's legacy is architecture. So for me, it's a way of giving back too.
We had a really interesting question, sort of a big question. These homes are works of art, and as you said, embrace nature and a simple lifestyle. Your style of McMansions fight with nature. Do you think that in a post-COVID world, we may somewhat revert back to more nature symbiotic relationships with our homes?
I wish that was the case. I think that might be a bit of a romantic notion. In fact, if I've seen anything over the past year, it's people are buying, the house, and they're buying the lot of land across the street, the property down the road, and they're creating these family enclaves, and bringing in all of their family, to closer. So I wish they would, but I think it's all about just showing people a different way to live, and the only way people are, going to change their mind is if we show them something different, and show people that you can live this way and really enjoy it, and I mean, are people really focusing about what's important? Yes, I think they are. But just out here, it's a bunch of financial people that want to buy, a bunch of land and chop it up into 10 lots and build, sell it for $5 million, $10 million each. So unfortunately, that's what we're up against. But then I'm also seeing things like Hampton Bays is starting to take off, because I think people are getting sick of, these 2-hour commute on 27 from Southampton to Montauk, and so, Hampton Bays is a really prime gray area, and there is some modern back there, and I just think people are going to want to move away from busier areas. That's what I would see to answer that question. Is I think you'll find more people not wanting to be literally right in town, but out in a field, hopefully.
Well, I'll say, yeah, as someone who currently lives in Hampton Bays, yeah, there's a lot of things popping up all over
Yeah,
the
and
place.
you can buy. Listen, you can buy waterfront in Hampton Bays for under $1 million still, which is unheard of out here. So, before I bought this house, I was looking at Hampton Bays.
Yeah.
So yeah.
And then, forgive my pronunciation, but somebody was asking, are there any Gwathmey-Siegel buildings of interest?
Yeah, a lot of gwathmey-siegel. I was asked, I've been speaking to the Amagansett Library people, and I'll probably do a talk with a better understanding of PowerPoint with them in the coming future, and that will really be on Gwathmey. A lot of his houses, Gwathmey houses out here, are in Amagansett, around that vicinity. And because this talk was more about Southampton, I didn't really focus so much on him because he's really a lecturer in himself. His houses are incredible. I mean, my goal in my life would be to own a Gwathmey house. I worked with his wife at Ralph Lauren for many years, and I have a huge respect for all of his work. So yeah, that would be another lecture down the road, and I'd love it if you would come to that as well.
Well, I think we're out of questions now, looking at everywhere, but I would say if you could send me that PowerPoint once you get that sorted out. When I put this up on YouTube, I can throw that in the description so everybody can take a look at any of the last couple of slides they might have missed.
Yeah, I would love that. I will definitely do that. And thank you everyone for coming and attending. I hope you learned something, and I hope you fight the fight, and get people interested.
Yeah, so everybody make sure to check out Hampton's 20th Century Modern .org, I believe, right?
Yep. Yeah.
And then head over to southamptonhistory.org, sign up for all of our future programs, and we'll see you guys all next time. Thanks for joining us.
Great. Thank you.